Okay. Okay, welcome guys. Sorry, I just talked to Physical Resources. They're working on the HVAC systems on this building. So there are some rooms that are like refrigerators, and some that are like saunas, like this one. So we'll last as long as they can. They're aware of the issue. They're trying to kind of balance the system out, but obviously with new equipment on the roof, it takes a while to kind of normalize that. So anyway, I apologize, and if people start passing out, you know, let me know if you feel like faint and you don't feel well. We'll do our best to kind of survive, and you know, I'll screencast this as well for those who are not big on the heat. I sent a note over the reading week, and I think some of the confusion in terms of labs. So the spirit of labs is that they're due within the week after the lesson is developed, and the idea behind a lab is that it gives you a chance to practice what we've done in class again on your own, and then you know, and it also allows me to check as I kind of look through that to see that people are on track and they're synthesizing the information, they're understanding it, and they're producing work that you know, that makes sense and listen that, and so the idea though is what I'll do now is I'll add a I guess I'll extend the due date for the labs for the first part of the course from 1 to 6 until Monday, November 5th. So if you haven't done those, because I didn't add a due date on those, I will accept those labs up until that time, and then at that point we move forward. So looking ahead then to the remainder of the labs, what I'll do is I'll put a due date on each lab, so you'll know in Blackboard that, okay, I have to get this done within the week in order for it to be graded and to count. Okay, so that's where labs are at for now. And labs are, the code should be your own. You're supposed to do them on your own. Obviously, if you're working, the spirit of a lab is that we carve out a little bit of time in class, and then you sit and collaborate, we talk, and you work through the problems. So it's supposed to be kind of an open collaborative session, but the code you submit needs to be your own. Okay? It needs to be your code. You don't, it's not a group submission. You submit your own work. Okay, so please be mindful of that. I think I talked about judging a book by its cover, assignment 2 last time before the break. I think I did. I believe I did talk about that. So make sure you read carefully the instructions. This is a single assignment, so this is your own work to be done on your own. So we're looking for a single landing page. Pick a book title that you're interested in. So this page needs to be powered by Bootstrap. So we want to get some photographs of the book cover, obviously, maybe the author, some other supporting imagery, and build out a grid-based page, right? So and you can use the Bootstrap grid, or as like today we're going to be learning CSS grid. So you're free to use, if you want to use the CSS grid instead of the Bootstrap grid, that's okay. You'll still need to download Bootstrap though, because this needs to feature a navigation bar, a carousel, an accordion, and or a tab panel. So all of those Bootstrap widgets need to be incorporated in this UI. Okay. So and I want clean, semantic, uncluttered HTML. Don't give me a sea of divs, right? Yes, when you go to Bootstrap, they give you examples of the code. Take that and make it your own code, as in put in semantic. You're going to have the odd div, but put in a section where a section belongs. Put in an aside, right, or a details element, or something that's more meaningful than just a collection of divs. The only reason they have all those divs is because it's generic code. They don't know what you're going to do with it, right? It's all class driven. So you add those classes. Any of these block level elements will work the same as a div. Okay. Yeah, and also we're looking for web fonts, right? If you weren't here for the web font lesson last time, look it up. Watch it on the YouTube channel for this course. Yeah, power the page with web fonts. right? That makes sense, and they're in keeping with the book, you know, the book cover or the brand or whatever like that. All your CSS and JS in separate custom files, right? And I'm looking for you guys to kind of push yourselves. I'd rather see you try something adventurous or maybe challenging and maybe not quite get it right than give me something very safe and predictable, right? If you're gonna go beyond and really stretch yourself, I'm not gonna punish you for breaking something if it doesn't quite work right. I want to see you guys challenge yourself and try and leverage these technologies to make something really interesting and really fun. So if you have any questions about this, please let me know. So take some time to read the PDF. I'm very clear about how I add marks to or how I assign marks to your work. It's all here in the assessment criteria. Okay. And I hope I got did I get the due date right on this one? Yes, Thursday, November 1st. Yes.
The question about carousel and coordinates. Do they work? Will they function the same way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's designed. Bootstrap is designed to be responsive. So doesn't mean it'll work exactly as you anticipate it might work, right? Try it, see what it looks like. It's designed unless you really do something kind of crazy with the markup or you try and fold in some other things. And for the most part, it should work. Test it, try it. You know. Very cool. Okay, so and today we're going to look at grid. So head over to weekly learning here. And if we scream down here to Flexbox and CSS Grid, Module 7. So the idea behind today's lesson is, yes, we've taught you how to do layout a la Bootstrap. Yes, we've taught you how to use the Bootstrap grid, use Bootstrap elements. But what if I'm not using Bootstrap? Right? Bootstrap is not the answer to everything. You know, a framework is not. You're not going to use a framework for everything. Bootstrap may not be around forever, right? Or something different might come along. What about if I just didn't want to for a particular application? I didn't want to be saddled with using a framework. I just wanted a great layout. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about two different technologies. One of these is called Flexbox, right? And Flexbox allows you to do some layout, kind of layout arrangements, and without using things like floats and clears, right? And it's reliable, it's well supported, it's really awesome. So we're going to learn the mechanics of Flexbox, which is good for simple layouts, right? Where we have multiple containers. We want it to be adaptive and responsive. We want it to be stable so that the layout won't break, and we want our markup to be fairly simple. So that's great. So we'll learn a little bit about how what are the parts of Flexbox, what are the properties in CSS, and how do we get it to work for us. That's part one. And then part two will be grid. So in the same way, grid is sort of like Flexbox, but Flexbox is kind of like you have a box with a number of containers, and it flows horizontally or vertically. And that's it, right? It's very simple. Grid is two-dimensional instead of one-dimensional. You can have rows and columns, and you can basically build out whatever kind of layout you wish, and it's independent from the markup. So the order of the elements in your page don't matter. You can simply design the grid, define what it looks like, plot those different element pieces in those little in those zones for your layout, and you're done. That's it. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. We've been waiting for this kind of layout technology in CSS for a long time now. And you know, what do I mean by a long time? And you might say, well, yeah, grid is cool, but it's not coming yet. Well, things have been moving along fairly steadily. So if you head over to caniuse.com and type in grid, for example, you can see browser vendors were pretty fast to jump on jump onto CSS grid support. So it just kind of like kaboom. Yes, we're all in. So the only real problems with CSS grid are going to be Opera Mini and the BlackBerry browser. Right? If you have a project that requires those, then just be aware of that lack of support. Otherwise, across the board, we have green lights. The Baidu and the QQ browser. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, Baidu's beginning to make a bit of progress. Huh. No support there though. IE11, the reason why they have a partial support, it's sort of broken in the sense that you have to use the MS prefix to get it to work, which is fine. You know, if IE11 is and it should be, you should be mindful of that. You have to bolt on the MS, and there's a kind of an older version of Grid that where the syntax was a bit different, but now all the browsers have agreed on what Grid looks like, so we should be good to go. All right, so what does Grid and Flexbox look like? Well, I'll show you. So let's pull down lesson file start.zip. And I'll show you just how easy, relatively speaking, it is. I'll just clean up my desktop here. Okay, so inside here, I've used the boilerplate. So we've got all the assets from boilerplate, like humans.txt, a web site manifest for Windows, tiles for Windows, desktop, and there's a couple of HTML files that we're going to look at. One is Grid and Flexbox. So we're going to start with Flexbox, and then we're going to go to Grid. So we'll start one-dimensional layout, and then we'll go to two-dimensional layout. But all of this is going to be powered by our CSS file. Okay, so fire up a code editor. I don't really care what code editor you want to fire up. No Visual Studio Code for me. Here it is. It's cool. So this is what all these stuff looks like in here. And fire up, if you will, flexbox.html. And we can open this up locally. And again, in the browser, I want flexbox.html. So it should look like this. I'll walk you through the CSS here. So if you fire up the CSS, notice I'm not using Bootstrap, right? I'm using boilerplate. So boilerplate would have you normalize the CSS, then do your own CSS. If you're using Bootstrap, again, do not normalize. It's already included. It comes with. So this is only if you're not using a framework like Bootstrap, then you have to normalize your CSS. I keep saying that, but I keep getting work that people have they've got Bootstrap and then there's normalize, or you put the normalize after your main CSS, and then you're going to be battling with cascading. Like you're going to have your normalize cascading over some of your custom rules, and it's going to it's going to really mess you up. So normalize first, like paint on, like primer on the walls. Main is your final coat of paint. Okay, so main kind of looks like this. So I've got the all of the boilerplate normalized styles, and then we get down to here. We go down to the author's custom styles, right? And I'll toggle word wrap. So here's the Flexbox. So what I've got here is, I've got anything with the element or the ID flex, right? So that's the flex part of the page. I'll open up this as well. Grid Flexbox. So we've got ID equal flex, right? And I put a background of gray and a gray border around. So every div that is directly descendant from the body, right? And that's, so there's the, here's the div here, which is the primary container. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different div elements inside that container, right? So that's going to style this. So that is going to have a gray border, and you can see that gray border here, right? I've put a padding inside, so every div that is directly descended from a div that is directly descended from a body will have 1 rem of padding. So I'm giving a little bit of space so that the all of these there's a little bit of room, 1 rem, 1 root m for padding to give the text a bit of room to breathe. Now here what we do is in this case I'm identifying each of these divs as div first of type, second of type, third of type, where these are directly descended from the div, which is the parent, which is directly descended from the body with the HTML and flex. Yep, question? No? Okay. Okay, so this identifies the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth div, and I put different background colors on it. That's it. No tricks. Okay. So what we'll do is we're going to arrange these 5 child items inside this gray box, which is the parent div. There's 5 divs inside a parent div. So the parent, this div here, is going to be our container, and these 5 elements are going to be our children. Okay? And I'll describe the nomenclature as we move along. So let's head into where is step 1? Okay, so and I need I wish the word wrap would persist. Okay, so first things first is we need to set the parent Flexbox properties. So the div that is directly descended from the body, and keep this is this one here, right? This is that particular div. My formatting's a little bit out. I'll tab that in. I'll tab these in. There we go. This one should go in here. That's better. So this is the, we're going to add a comment up here, and this will be this is our Flex container. And I'll put a comment in here. That won't do anything. So what we need to do when we have a flex box, we have to have something that is the container to control the flow of a number of children. So we have to first and foremost say to this div here, I need to set this, and I use the display property, and we just say flex. like that. Okay. Just like saying display block, or display inline block, or display inline, we're now saying display flex. That changes everything. So everything, now all of the children of this element are now being controlled via the Flexbox property. So if we go File Save, you'll see suddenly it's quite a different, and we can resize that document. Okay, so now those are what you're seeing as a number of the default visual properties for Flexbox. Okay, one of the defaults is to render these things in a row instead of in a column, which was what you first saw. Right. So step 2 is we have to define the main axis. So whether we are going to flow the children, the child divs inside this horizontally or vertically down. And I'll refer to Chris Coyer's very good. This is it's kind of emerged as the default kind of go-to for all things Flexbox. You want to understand how Flexbox works, what the terms are, what the terminology, what the syntax is. This is probably the best place to go. So, and he keeps it up to date. So you see it was last updated not long ago, October 23rd. So the purple thing is the container, and the divs inside are the orange things, right? So in this case, we want to just define, are we going to be running these things horizontally, left to right, or right to left, or vertically? Top to bottom, bottom to top. That's what the flex direction property sets. So down here, we'll go to flex-direction. And right now, the default is row. So if I simply say row, that won't change anything. That's the default. But if I say column, that's what we saw originally, right? And I can also say, oh, well, what about column dash reverse? So I can say instead of top to bottom, let's go bottom to top. So remember, this is why I arranged these with different colors. So now I'm starting with the 5th one. I'm going 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st. Right? No, I'm not touching any of my markup. Right? So I can also I can say, well, yeah, let's do row reverse as well. Start with the 5th, over to the 1st. So let's leave this here for argument's sake as row. Save that. Okay, so the next thing is, imagine if all of those boxes in here, I don't want them to stay on one row. Maybe I want them to wrap to a new row. Start around. So the best way to see this is and he just updated the illustrations in here, which they were good before, but now they're extra friendly. So anyway, so what if I wanted those boxes, the flex items inside the flex parent, to wrap to a new row, right? Right now, the default, Flexbox really tries to keep everything on one row, if it can, if it can fit, possibly. But we can control that with the Flexwrap property. So this we do here, that we say flex-wrap, and we can either say no wrap, so do not wrap to a new row, right? Wrap, yes, if we run out of room horizontally or vertically, wrap to a new row or to a new column, or wrap reverse, go the other way. So let's say we'll say wrap for argument's sake. Now this won't do anything. Oh, it did. Interesting. As soon as the column was over, the content was over, this one didn't fit, so it wrapped to a new line. If I shrink it down, you'll see this a little bit better. So since the width of these elements are auto, actually it's doing exactly what it should. Since the width is auto based on the content, the green one wouldn't fit in there, so it went to a new line, and then of course the blue one and the purple one. So it's just, right? Now, first if I go full size, none of them fit side by each, so they just stack. What I can do is I can set a fixed width on the Flex children to see this even better. So if I go down to step 3B, and this is where I'm styling the divs inside the div, inside the body. So these are the children of the Flex container, right? And so I think I set these at 30%. Make sure my experimentation doesn't go right here. Yeah, I said, so let's say width 30%. So all of them are the same width, 30% of the page. That's about right. You'll see the wrap, right? Let's go back up to step 3A and change the Flex wrap to no wrap, one word. And it says, no, it's not going to happen, right? Then, of course, these are going to be obviously more than or less than 30%, but that's the way it goes. Or we can say wrap dash, which is really weird, reverse. First, second, third, and then it wraps up to the line above it instead of the line below it. You're like, why would I ever want to do that? I don't know. You may find a reason to do it. I don't know. But you can do it, right? Think about how much manipulation of my HTML I would have had to do this without these properties, right? Pretty cool. So I'll leave this wrap for now. And step 4, so 5. There we go. Okay, so then the other thing I can do is I can align the children on the cross axis with align items. So I'll show you what this looks like in the diagram. So if we go down here and we say, I must have missed something. Did I miss?
Yeah, 4A.
Oh, I missed 4A. I missed a step. I did. I messed it. Okay. Let's control alignment of the flex children along the main axis with justify content. So what do I mean by justify content? So Flexwrap, justify content. So here's the deal with this. So if we have a container that is bigger or larger than the children, I can stack these up in a row. If I'm arranging them flex direction row, they can at the start of the flex box. They can go slam over to the end of the flex box. We can center them, or we can arrange them so that the space between is automatic, or space around, or we can space them evenly, right? So so in this case, space around, I'd have the same amount of space on the left and right of each container. So that's why the space in the middle of those is 2x and this is 1x. So, or I can just space them. I mean, that alone is worth the price of admission right there. Justify content, right? Imagine trying to do that with floats and clears and padding and margins and things like that. Very difficult to do. This takes a lot of that thinking out of it. So let's take a look and see what we can do with justify content. So we'll go back here. So we'll say justify content. We'll say flex dash start. I will have to reduce the width of the children to see this to some. So we'll go down here to the let's set them to width 10%. So let's go down here, step 4B, and change the width of the children to 10% this time. This will, of course, cascade over step 3B. So this is what the Flex children will all be 10% width now. Save that up. So there's what Flex Start looks like, right? They'll all go to the start of the Flexbox over here, and they're all 10%. Right? Let's go back up here for A, and we'll change this now to Flex End. I'm over to the end of the Flexbox. What about center? South American, not Canadian. Look at that. Right? How cool is that? Let's go for space between. Wow, that was easy. If you've ever been trying to do things like that with other layout methods, you're going to look at that and go, that's a lot easier. Let's talk about space around. Where that might be helpful is if you had, imagine along the top of an information panel, you wanted the tabs centered, right? You want a little bit of space between them. Out they go, right? And you no longer have to worry about the width or space margins or padding or anything like that. It's all done. It's all kind of figured out for you. That's cool. So let's go then to step 5. Align Flex children on the cross axis with align items. So what does this mean? And a lot of this stuff is kind of really kind of abstract. So we look at align items. Right now, the default is stretch. So what it does is says, irrespective of how much content is in each one of these boxes, stretch the height to the full height of the container of the parent, right? That's the default. So that's what you're seeing is stretch. So, but we can change that. So we can say align Flex children. So we say align dash items. Let's say Flex dash start. Do this. So now they go to the top. They start at the top or the start of the Flexbox, and then the height is now auto, right? Now, if I want, I can change that. I can go Flex End. Now they sit on the baseline of the Flexbox. Height is still auto, but it's almost like this is like a baseline of text. We can also say just center. And this is one of the things that we've been waiting for a long time. The ability to vertically center something within an element. This has been very elusive before now, right? So center, and we can also do baseline. Baseline, did I break it? Baseline. That doesn't look right. Oh, text. I could in fact have too much text to see the baseline here. I think we do. I think I have too much text to order. So if you have a single line in there, irrespective of the height of the box, the baseline of the text will be aligned. I don't think what I've got here is going to demonstrate this particular scenario. Cool. So let's leave this at flex start. Leave this as flex start. We'll come back to this when we break convention, where we start to style the children independently. Okay. Cool. Step 6. So specify how flex children will be reflowed when there's extra space in the cross axis. So we'll need to resize the children so that they wrap to see this happening. This is a bit abstract. Is that align content? Yeah, align content. So if you look here, we'll need to wrap the elements again so that we can see how we're doing. But what we're doing, in effect, is when we have elements that are wrapping to a new line, how is that collection organized? Do we slam them up to the top, the bottom of the container? Do we center them out vertically, right, along this vertical? So this is called the cross-axis. So the cross-axis is, these are arranged in a row. The cross-axis is vertically. How are we now organizing this collection? So what we'll do is we'll get them to wrap again. So we need to go back to resize the children so they wrap. So we'll go down here and size these children again so they wrap. And let's set them to width 30%. Okay. 6B. Save that. And we also have to change the justify content to flex start. Again, we'll change this up here on where we set this justify content. We'll say flex start. We'll change that. And we're just doing this so we can see the aligned content. We'll change that back to that. And that should give us that, right? So now they're wrapping. Okay. So we said align dash content. And we can say flex start. Oh, we also say, let's say flex start. The other thing we need to be able to do to see this in action, if you look at the diagram here, is I have to make sure that the flex container is taller than the collection of children. So I'm going to have to set this purple box, which is the flex container, to a bigger height. So what I'll do is I'll show you an interesting value. We'll set the flex container to the full height of the viewport. So where's our flex container? Up here on step 6D. Now we're going to set the flex container to height. Let's say 100 viewport height. That basically means 100% of the height of the viewport. It's kind of like saying width 100%, right? In this case, it's height. If I do that, now my Flexbox is the height of the container, right? Irrespective of how much content it is. Now we can go back to align content, and we can say flex start, or we can say center, change it to center under this is step 6A. It's helpful to have these illustrations. Now they're going to wrap around in 2 rows in the center of the height. Remember, instead of working rows, we're doing height, so this is called cross axis. So now I basically have this scenario here, right? Now maybe I want stretch. Why don't I change to this scenario here. So I can say stretch. And then maybe I want space around or space between. Space around. It's kind of like we did justify content, but on the cross axis, right? And if you want to flip it around and say the flex direction is column, then the cross axis would then be the rows. You see what I mean? It's a bit of a mind bender because it has no bearing whatsoever on any of the layout tools we've ever used, which are position absolute, floats, clears. You have to forget all of that and clear your mind of any and all of that stuff. This has no bearing on that. Okay, so that's cool. Step 6. So step 7. Where did I stash step 7 on myself? So now we're going to look at. We're going to turn our attention to the flex items. So not only can we style the all of these properties have been set on the box. So all of these have been set on the parent container. I haven't addressed a single child element. This is all the container element that I've been controlling. But I can do different things with specific children if I want. So what I can do is I can change the order in which the children appear, for example. So let's go down here and let's say the div nth of type 1. So the first div that's inside the parent div. So this is the first flexed item. And if you've got this open here in another tab, right? I can set properties for the parent container, which we've just done. And we've covered all the main ones. Now we can set properties for the children inside, individually, which is super powerful, right? So what if I want to change the order of things? Absolutely. So let's go to div nth of type 1, and I'll say order 4. And the second one, I'm going to change to put it the first, order 1. What is that? Order, and then the third one I'll leave order 3. The fourth one I'll set as the second one. The fifth one I'll set as order 6. Oh, sorry, order 5. I'll leave that the 5th. So save that, and then you can see by assigning individual orders to those, I can plot them out however I want. Cool. I can also control how each of these children are sized with Flex Grow. This one, I confess, I have a bit of trouble wrapping my head around it. I've read this and I've experimented with it time and again. I've reread the guide, and I have to be honest, and I say I'm really not exactly sure I understand what they mean by Flex Grow. So they define it as the ability for a flex item to grow if necessary. So, for example, here, and what we do, you set you set a proportion for the children. So in this case, here in the example, they're saying, well, here I guess we're saying that in this bottom row here, the second one would be double 2x, and the other children would be x. Okay, so we'll try it and see. I haven't been able to get this to work predictably in the way that I expect it to work. But anyway, we'll try it. So what did I experiment with? So we'll say that the nth of type 1, let's comment out the orders first of all. We'll comment out all these orders so they don't affect what we're doing. But we know we can do that. So let's go to the first element. What we're going to say the first one is going to be flex grow 1. Flex grow 1. Set the second one also to flex grow 1. So this is it's a unitless number, just a proportion basically. And then the third one, I'll do the third one flex grow 1 as well. And then the fourth one, flex grow 2. So let's say this is double the width of the other children in the set, if necessary, if there's room for growth, is the way I understand it. And then fifth, we'll leave. What did I set this at? Flex. I'll set that also as 2. So we'll set this one to flex grow 2 as well. Flex grow 2. The fourth and fifth are flex grow 2, and the first 3 are flex grow 1. I'll say. I guess that makes sense. It does in this. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Anyway, I find that a bit abstract, but there you go. You can control basically if there's room to grow. It's almost like when you set text to justify. It doesn't. It will go the whole width and say, well, I'll make this double the width if I can of the other ones, like a proportion. Flux grow, kind of weird, but there it is. And step 9, where did I put step 9? Flex basis on this particular child. So flex basis, the way flex basis, it's sort of similar to flex grow, except you can plot you can kind of code in a width, the default size of an element before any remaining space is distributed to the other children. So if you're like one element has to be with X, I don't care what the others are. I think that's where flex basis comes in helpful, right? So we'll go here, we'll set the flex basis on the fourth child in this case. And we'll set the flex basis to 600 pixels. We'll do a absolute unit, 600 EX. This is for the fourth unit. Try that. And again, I think it's almost like it offers more of a guideline for the width rather than a fixed unit. Anyway, that I find abstract as well. But flex basis. So 9. And step 10, I think, is the last for Flexbox, and we'll take a break. Step 10A, align a particular flex child differently than the rest with align self. So all of these are align items, right? So if we go back to up to the flex container at the top, what do we set the align items to? Align. Align items are flex start. So all of these will start at the top, and the height will render them downward, whatever their height is. We can make an exception for any one of these by overriding this. So I can go head down to step 10B. No, 10. Where's my 10A? 10A. So we're going to take div nth of type 4. We're going to change this. We're going to say align self. Right? And let's say to and see what the properties are here. So this is here. We can say flex align self. So if all of them are flex start, right? We can say flex end for this one in particular, and it starts at the bottom of the Flexbox container. And so let's say flex end. Make this one a bit different. Right, so that one now, instead of flex start at the top, is now on the bottom. You can also do, I can do it to the second one if I want. That'll be a bit more obvious. So I can copy this and go up to the nth of type 2. And also do that one if I want. Like, well, when would I ever need to do this? Well, the point is you can, and you never know when you're arranging a number of controls or information panels or doing whatever it is with your UI. Being able to do this kind of willy-nilly, one at a time, is pretty cool. So that kind of covers all of the things you can do with Flexbox. So Flexbox is really, really super cool. But remember, it's kind of a one-dimensional layout tool where you're arranging things horizontally or vertically, and you want to distribute them or center them vertically or horizontally and control that layout for children inside a single box. So the support for this is across the board. It's awesome. Use it today. Use it everywhere. Okay. Cool. I'll give you a break from the heat so you can mop off your brow. And when we come back, we'll do grid. If the heat's a bit too overwhelming, I'll continue to let this run. And I do understand, like, it's 85 degrees in here. I get it. I'll come back. So in about at about 4:15, I'll do the grid, and then we'll do, and then there's a lab at the end of this. Okay, cool. Take a breather. We got some water. Holy cow.
आंसर लगाएंगे पूरे का आपने वे आईटी जो है अब यार अपन क्या कर देखिए ये तो आओ ना पहले इसको इधर तो मैं आ जाए कैलकुलेट अरे कोई कोड पेज करने हम तो ये जाते हैं नहीं तो आ जाएगा तो हम ये फोन ही का है ini dong itu yang jadi baik dulu baik kok pakai oke oh ya
Yeah, that would be more intuitive. I think the way that they design the system is to set a threshold for above X, start cooling. If it's below Y, you gotta keep, believe it or not, it's winter, air conditioning is on. Obviously, yeah. Oh, yeah. I gotta go get a drink of water. I can.
Yeah. Belum silang. Kamera ini bagi kamera itu. Suruh kata क्या लिया नहीं है प्रार्थना में आया Thank you, Ari. Boleh diberikan berapa kali? Karena udah tinggal di rumah orang boleh kan kan deh. Boleh kita itu. Ini kita jadi. Nah, untuk kerja ya. Seperti juga ini. Tidak.
Wow. You forgot how hot it was? I did. I think it's gotten hotter like 6 hours. Yeah. Yeah. Oh God. Thanks. Thanks, Al. Wait, Henry's knows he. I don't wait. In the movie?
Yeah.
Well, in the movie, he can't get a job. Because it's in the movie, so his son's having a birthday party.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's selling this chat. There's a lot of people selling it. And he finds that they hired canceled. And in it, there's like this ghetto restaurant. And it's not even, it's just like literally like a suit and like a hat and nose. So he puts it on, goes, does a party, and then at the end of the night, because he's hosting his party with his wife, falls asleep, wakes up in the morning, then goes to take it off. The nose is stuck on, the wig is stuck on. Then
He makes his off and wakes up his back on.
no, he never gets it off.
Oh.
It's such a good movie too. Like,
No, I think he just get off.
yeah.
And she went to bed. She got his back on.
Yeah, he did.
What I did. I was on my chest. Like, walks and straps. Get up.
Buried it.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I want to show you. We watch the trailer. Yeah.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
Hey, how's your break? Good.
Relax.
That's good. Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, I went camping, hiking in the woods. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what tomorrow looks like.
Yeah.
I think the morning is toast for me tomorrow. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Yeah, so the morning's kind of booked up with stuff. But anytime after, are you here in the afternoon?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say anytime after my weekly review is, that's just when I kind of.
After 12.
Yeah, anytime after 12 is okay. If you want to show up then.
Yeah, that's fine.
Whenever you want. So I'll be here for the better part of the afternoon.
It was like,
So
it's as good
it's
as.
up to you, but I'll be busy certainly until 12 o'clock. Like I usually have office hours, but I have a meeting with my boss,
It's good. It's like,
the president. Also, I have to go to the president's meeting.
so it's not like.
So,
There's a bad guy out there.
12.
And also, if I see you,
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, no problem.
I have some problem, but now I have.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, we'll have to get through. We've got to get through grid today, and the last for your assignment too. Yeah.
So I changed something inside, but now I
So
just.
it's like you don't know
And
that thing.
That's good.
it's, but I want just go slide.
Oh, the carrot.
Something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can look at that.
But I watched it with my sister way back in the day. One of the first. As an idiot, it just freaked me out and I watched one for years. But it was one of the first ones on my own.
You get carrots, good job, sir.
And all like my girlfriends growing up, they all like horror movies. So like,
Straight
I'd go hang out with like my girlfriends and then I'll like, come on, here's me and you. I'm like, like now, like I'm kind of over it, like I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like it depends on what kind of horror. Like Oculus was really dope. It's about a haunted mirror that kills like this girl's parents.
But you wanted to go.
That's
I never watched it, but I remember seeing previews for
it
it.
was super good. And like basically the mirror like has a vicinity it can
Yeah.
they get stronger and like sort of plants and shit. But basically
Oh, yeah.
there's one scene that have the backup generators. She's walking after as a kid and planning to like take her back and destroy it. And they're like she's throwing this ball.
Go back to your go back to the Ottawa.
A socket that's hooked up to this battery. And
So this is your real text. So now, so why don't we try to put that graphic
It's like where you're eating. She put the apple down.
Yes.
She puts the light bulb.
That in the background.
And it goes to fighting. It's very loud.
background
And like
on the head.
that will
Background.
Yes, so this is text, right? Yes.
But
So-
it's like actually her.
Yes, so I want you to put that as the background image for
This
each
one
one.
is
Yeah, it's super cool movie.
Yeah, but this is the image, right?
And then the
Yeah,
end is one of those.
I want just the image of the clock
in here.
on the H1, the background image for the H1. Not the text, I just want that here, and open up the space between the words. So it looks like that. So I want this to look like that.
This one look like that.
I want each one to look exactly like that with that picture.
Wow.
Right? So you can center a background on each one. I gave you this with the lab. You got that picture.
There's more reason to go in space. It's not like, oh,
This one I
no, it's a.
Yes, so that's good. So also in the lab, for all the files for the lab, I include just the clock. That's, so I want you to take just the image here as well, put it in the background of your issue. Because this, the words are a picture, right? This is all of you, right?
No.
No? Was this text?
Yeah.
Oh,
Some of you, I know.
oh, you put the image. Oh, I see. Okay, so this isn't an image. This is real text. Oh, I see. Okay. No, that's fine then. That's fine. No, sorry. I thought that whole thing was an image. No, you've already done it. Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, it's good. That's what I want. It looks so good. I thought it was a picture. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Grid. So awesome. So what I'd like you to do for this, also for this week for Module 7, I'd like you to spin through both of these guides, the guide to Flexbox and the guide to Grid. There's a short quiz that covers some of the topics in both of these here. So I'd like you to complete the quiz as well. They're based on those readings, and of course, hanging out here is cool too. But let's go over to the grid. And the grid is so awesome, and this is actually only the second time I think I've taught grid, CSS grid. Last year I taught it about this time, but there was a real caveat in the sense that there was some real serious browser support issues. This year they're largely gone. I mean, we're talking about IE 11 is largely works, and Edge is full speed ahead. So there really aren't too many reasons why, if you have a grid-based layout, you shouldn't be using this now, today. It's simple. It's a lot simpler than bolting on, in my opinion, a framework once you understand how it works. So anyway, we'll show you. The guide to grid here on CSS Tricks is by Chris House. He unapologetically kind of what he did was he looked at this terrific guide and he said, I'll model it after this very successful tutorial. And so it's kind of based the same way. He'll walk you through the introduction. You know, what is the grid all about? What does browser support look like? Right? Like even mobile is pretty good. He'll walk you through what the basic terminology is. So what is a grid container? What's a grid item? What's a grid line? What's a grid track? What's a grid cell? And what's a grid area? So once you understand those key concepts, then it's just a matter of making sure your markup is clean and simple, and it doesn't matter what the order of things are. You can then plot it out. So the idea here with grid is it's two-dimensional in the sense that we're dealing with, it's not just talking about a flex boxes. We're either running a bunch of boxes in a line, and that line is either horizontal or it's vertical with a container around it. That's Flexbox. Grid is we have rows and columns, right? And we define what those rows and columns are, how wide they are, right? How they behave, what they're, you know, and then we plot our content onto that grid, right? So the grid container, just like Flexbox, we have a container that holds those grid items, right? We have the items inside that container, so they're the direct children of that container. That's the same. But because we're dealing with a two-dimensional layout now, we have grid lines, which are effectively the gutters. If you've got a graphic design background, in a grid base you have gutters, right, between your content. Grid lines are those gutters, or the spaces between the cells in the grid. The grid track is a fancy word for the row, or if you could also talk about a column as a track. So it's a track of cells. An individual cell, when you think of it just like a table or a cell in Excel, right? Each one of those content boxes where you can type content into is a cell. A table cell, a grid cell, a spreadsheet cell, a cell. And a grid area, which we can actually manipulate and plot content into, is user defined. You define once you have that grid, what each of those areas are what, which columns and rows they span, and what you call them, and what you drop in. That's it, right? So I'm going to go through the properties for the parent, and I'm going to go through the properties for the children, which there are less of than the parent. Most of the controls are plotted out on the parent element, just like Flexbox. And then we'll let you. I'll give you a little bit of a challenge where I'll give you an illustration of a grid, and then I want you to try and recreate that using some simple markup. Okay. So grid container. In order to take a look at this, first we want to go instead of using flexbox.html, let's go to grid.html. And I'll view, we'll toggle that. Okay, go away. Cool. So, here's the deal. We have a div. I've given it a class container that basically holds a number of items, and I've classed them item A, B, C, D, and E. Right? And there's the end of the container. So this is all the markup I'm dealing with. Very simple. Okay. I just use divs because they're generic, and I'm not going to make any assumption about what you can use any block level element, any sectioning element for those grid children, those grid items, or the grid container. You can use any sectioning or block level element you want. So each one. So let's take a look and see what it looks like without any styling here, and we'll just change this to grid. The default styles, I just put a background color on each one of these things, just so you can see it. So it's super abundantly clear how these fit together. And each one just has a heading and some bogus content. That's it. So we have a header, a sidebar, a main, footer, and a navigation. Let's go over to main.css, and you'll see there's down around line 180-ish. You should see something. A comment heading there called grid. Okay. So we're going to start at step 11. Okay. Where's my white space? All right. And I want indent using tabs. Grid doc container. So first of all, why does it always dump my word wrap for whatever reason? Okay. So we're going to set the grid element with the grid class container as the, we'll set this to display instead of flex. In this case, it is grid. Tricks. Immediately, you'll see some rendering differences on the screen. Okay, that's just a result of any and all defaults that are assumed, right? Now we need to define the columns for the grid with a property called grid template columns. So over here. So we've displayed grid or inline grid, which I'm not sure, I haven't used that one yet. So now we want to define the grid template columns and the grid template rows. So now we'll say grid template columns. And what we'll do is we're going to set each of these, and we use a space separated width. I'm going to say 25%, 5%. So all I'm doing is I'm implying here that my grid is going to have 4 columns, each of 25%. Done. Save that. And immediately, you can see the grid starts rendering itself out. The next thing I also want to do is I want to define the rows for the grid with grid template rows. So we say grid template rows. And what I can do is I can use a space separated list of widths, or I can just use auto. In this case, I'll say automatic. And that will just size the rows according to the content of the grid children. So no big deal. Now this is the cool part. So I want to step 14. I want to designate the cells of the resulting grid in terms of user named content areas. Okay. So what I actually do is I plot out how I want my stuff to reside. So let's say I want a header right at the top and a footer at the bottom. I want my navigation, my main content, and my sidebar. Right? So basically kind of a holy grail layout, kind of like the head, top, bottom, and 3 elements in the middle kind of thing. No tricks. So what I can do is I can draft this out. I can say grid-template-areas. And remember, the browser ignores white space. So what I can do is I can do this. Very often you'll see this. Let's go to a new line. And this becomes a visual representation of your layout that you're building. Keep in mind, I've defined already 4 columns up here, right? So that I need to keep in mind when I'm doing this. So now what I'm going to say, okay, I want the header to span all 4 columns. Forget everything you know about layout. Just forget all of it. Okay, we're just plotting it out. So the first row is going to be each column in the first row of 25%. So I'll do 100% wide header. Okay. Then I go to the next row, and now I'm going to say, then I want my navigation, and I want the main part of my content to span 2 columns, and then I want my sidebar. You might be saying, but what am I referring to with header and navigation and sidebar? What am I talking about? I don't have anything like that in my markup. I'm not referring to don't worry about it. Just stay with me. So, and then the bottom, of course, I want the footer to span all 4 columns. I say all 4 columns are the footer. Oops, I made a mistake. I have to quote this here. Quote. I have to quote each row. My bad. When I'm finished, I finish off with the end of. Finish off the declaration with a semicolon. Sorry, so each row is quoted. So the browser knows, because the browser ignores white space, so it knows that that string is a complete row. My apologies. So this is how I plot out that, in light of the fact that I plotted out 4 columns and the rows are automatic. So whatever many number of rows and whatever height they need to be is plotted out automatically for me with auto. That's what I want. Now, so how do I map then my content in the page? How do I map this stuff here? There's my header, my sidebar, but they're just divs with classes, right? There's nothing that says this is the main part of my page. I'm not even using a main element. I'm just using a div. How do I map that to this illustration here? Okay, we'll show you. So go to step 15. Go back up again here, 15A. So now I want to associate the below element with the user-defined content zone header, right? So this is item class grid class item A, and this is here I have a class on this div of item A. So this will refer to this content, this element here, which is a div with the h2 header and some content. I can refer to this thing as the element with the class item-a. So let's go back to main.css, right? And I can say under the rule for a class element class item A, I can say grid-area header. Now this here maps this element with the class item A to this. So save that. Now the header maps all the way across the top. Right? So this, I can call this whatever I want. This is kind of like, you know, when you're using web fonts and you call the font whatever you want, and then you can, when you define it, and then with add font face, then you use it elsewhere. These are not, these labels are user defined. You define them whatever you want them to be, but you associate this here by doing grid area on the associated element. If you can wrap your head around that part, you've got grid. That's the toughest, that's the most abstract kind of leap of faith you have to make there. So now what I'll do is let's take a look at what else have I got. So next down here, I want the navigation part here to be kind of over to, I want it to be here, right, on the left. So I can map that one to my grid. So I have to go and find my navigation content. This is, my navigation content is item-e, right? It doesn't matter what the source order of your content is. You can put your HTML in any order you want. As long as these elements are inside the container that is set as the grid container, you're good to go. So I want element with the class item E to be my map to my navigation. So then what I do is I go down to 15b. So, oh no, go down to item E here. And I say grid area navigation. And that maps this with that. Okay? So this, I'm tying this here to this on my my grid template. So save that, and as soon as I do that, navigation gets plotted there. I mean, for anyone who's been doing layout with HTML and CSS, you'll look at this and go, "What? Huh? Really? Get out of here!" That is so incredibly cool. Anyway, so now what does my column look? Now, of course, then I want the main part of my content to span the two center columns. So how do I do that? Well, the template already knows that the main content will span 50% of the page, right? Because I've plotted it out twice in this template areas, right? So it will already do that. So I've already handled that part. All I have to do is associate my content in my HTML with that grid area. So what does that look like? What is my main content? It's item C. Let's go over here to item C. Item C here. And I say grid area. Main. That's not to be confused with the main element, right? That would be a selector. We're not dealing with selectors here. This is a value, a property value. So save that, and automatically, here's our main spanning two columns in the center. And my sidebar, well, let's do the footer first. So we'll do the footer. The footer is, what did I call the footer here? Item D. It's not even the last one in my source order, so it doesn't even matter, right? Maybe for whatever reason, I want the footer to come before the navigation in my source order for my code. Maybe that's important from a functionality perspective. I don't know. It doesn't matter, right? So it's item D. is for the footer. So I say item D, grid area, footer. And off I go. And the sidebar, it's plotted there by default because I've left it to the end. But I can certainly do. I can certainly be prescriptive and say grid area for the sidebar is sidebar. Why not? Okay. Now, here's the cool part. Imagine I want the sidebar to take up 2 columns here. All I have to do now, I can leave all that alone, and I can say, well, how about the sidebar now takes the 2 columns here instead. Done. Expecting more? Awesome. There's no reason why you shouldn't be using this today. We're doing grid-based layouts that are complicated. And the great thing about it is, now what you can do, imagine you want to change this layout for different screens. So you just set up your media queries and you draw a different template for each size of screen. You're done. That's so awesome, right? And it's it. Support's there. This is production ready code. There's nothing future. We got to wait a couple of years for this. This is go time on this. Like this is, anyway. After having worked with CSS layout for, I don't know, the better part of 20 years now, this has been worth the wait. This is pretty good. All right. Not only that, it gets better. So what did they say? And wait, there's more. Yeah. So if we go into step 15, we did all that. Step 16 is the gutters. So remember we talked about the. Remember we talked about here in the. So the grid lines here. If I wanted space between these items here, so I wanted to add a little bit of breathing room, I can adjust those gutters with the grid line. So I go here, I call this, they call it grid column gap. So I can say in here, step 16A, and I can say grid dash column dash gap. And since I'm using percentages for my columns up here, I might as well keep everything water soluble, right? Water and water, oil and oil, and say 1%. There we go. Get out of here. Seriously. Yep. And of course, I can do the same with row tracks with grid row gap. And maybe I'll do an absolute value because I'm not using percentages on the heights. So I'll do that. Or you could do one rem if you wanted. You could use a typographical unit of measure, whatever you want. Man, that's pretty cool. And really not a lot of code here, right? Not a lot of code. You've got your container, your items, give them classes or IDs, plot them out on the template, and off you go. Right? Offer a different template for different screen sizes with media queries. You want them all. You want a 2 or 3 column, simple 1 or 2 column layout. Below a certain breakpoint. Make the grid template very simple. Change the column widths if you wanted to. Right? You can change all that. 16. I think that might be. think that's all I wanted to do with grid. I think you have all you need with grid now. And of course, I want you to take some time. You'll see that the scroll bar is super tiny. You're like, oh man, this article is 8,000 pages long. No, it's not really. Most of it is comments at the bottom, so not to worry. But I would like you to spin through this and you know, start to get a sense of what is possible with this grid and how easy this is, right? So there's all kinds of justification. You can justify content inside the cells if you wanted to, kind of like Flexbox. Flexbox and grid work very, very nicely together. Inside a grid cell, you want to organize some content using Flexbox? Sure, they work very well hand in hand, right? Think of Flexbox as the baby brother of grid, really. Grid's the two-dimensional one, and you know. Anyway, so you can do. There's all kinds of alignment, cell alignment tools if you want, right? Align center. Geez, we couldn't do that before. That's pretty awesome. Place self, you know. Place self center. You ever seen that? Wow, that is pretty helpful. Centers it vertically and horizontally with one block chunk, one line of code. So spin through that. And here, so what I want you to do here for your lab is so in your lesson files, you already have lab7.html. Okay? So what I'd like you to do is plot lab7.html, build this grid, and see if you can get it to render. So I want a header, I want the branding with the two top cells here, advertising across the top button, the search box, take to the top right, global nav just underneath with 4 columns, our top story across 3 columns, global, national, local news, an advertising block, market info, and our footer and local map. Okay. So set a background color too, just for your, I guess, just so you can visually recognize them. Set a background color that is close to whatever the colors I have here on the page. And I'll pull up CSS grid, and that is, where is it? Lab 7. There it is. There's Lab 7. Okay. I think I forgot the start of your container. Did I forget this container start? I think I broke it already on you. I did. Validate Scott's HTML before you get going. So yeah, I think that you need a grid container, so you'll need to start the div up here. Need this. Here we go. Cool. Make Lab 7, make that like that. Okay. Again, my apologies for the sauna in which we find ourselves today. That is nuts. Hopefully the upgrades will be worth it. What else did I want to talk about? I want to talk about presentation 1. Presentation 1 is, I'll bring this over here. So if you go into presentations, presentation 1 is about Bootstrap components. So what I'd like you to do, this is due on November 11th, so you've got some time to think about this one. I don't want this to be a long one. I want it to be fairly simple, short and sweet. I want you to get some experience with other Bootstrap components. So what I want you to do is pick a Bootstrap component that we have not covered in class. So you pick whatever one you want. And I want you to, with a short video screencast, so there's lots of video screencast tools out there. They're all free. Well, some of them are not, but you can use anything you want. Hangouts over here is fine. What I want you to describe what the component is, how you might use it in a web app. Walk me through, put together a little piece of code, walk me through the code, tell the audience how to implement the component and to get it working properly. And then demonstrate how you might customize it to make it fit your particular application, right? And try and do that in well under 10 minutes. You might say 10 minutes, that's long. It goes really fast. It's like, you really got to be very, very concise to keep it under 10 minutes, right? So find a component that we haven't covered in class, describe what it could be for, walk me through a chunk, take the code and make it your own, kind of walk me through a little chunk of code, show me how to use it, and to get it working effectively, show me how you can customize it, make it look super cool, to make it fit whatever application, and submit, and then capture that screencast. And if you don't want to share that, do you want to make it private on YouTube or whatever, that's totally cool. You don't have to share this with anybody but myself for evaluation purposes. If you would like to share it with other people, that's great. Part of your career is going to be sharing your skills with other people, helping other people learn how to do things. Part of what you're doing is going to be educational. This is a good way to start. It's a different experience being on this side of the screen than being on the other side of the screen. But what I'd like you to do here, this is optional. If you want to share your screencast with the rest of the class, post it to the discussion board here with a link. If you don't want to, you don't have to do that. Okay, that's not part of the evaluation for the screencast. But if you'd like to share to anyone's benefit, off you go. I'm not grading that part. So it's a simple mark out of 25. I'm looking that you effectively describe the component using possible applications. The code is described, all parts of the code, the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. Show me all three pieces. Show me, this video shows me how to get it working properly. You tell me how to customize or improve upon the component, and it's lively, energetic, entertaining, and interesting. So try and keep upbeat. We've all suffered through tutorials that are kind of like, wow, this person sounds like they'd rather be, I don't know. I know. I know. You don't drink. Yeah. What?
One of those four things.
All right. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Drink a Monster before you do it, right? All kinds of great energy drinks out there to get going, right? Make it fun as you can. There you go. So that's it. So just to give you a kind of a top-down too about the course. So you get a sense of where you are, where we've got what we've got left to do. You look at the syllabus here. If there's something you don't see, so there's 3 assignments. There's 1 project. There's a presentation. There's quizzes and labs, which will amount to your course mark. Okay, so I'll talk about the project next week. I think it's live. Is the project live, or is it still hidden?
You should make it live.
Is it? It's live.
Is it?
Yeah, project 1's live. I'll talk about it next week. That's kind of a fun. It's kind of a fun thing to do, and then yeah. So there's 1 presentation. The quizzes, of course, not every week we'll have quizzes. I'm trying to build these out as fast as I can. Some of them I've got there's 1 this week for sure, and your labs. Okay. Right on. Good. Build me a grid. Build me a grid. Make it work.
So I know you said that the one lab week,
A week. Yeah, a week.
Was
The quizzes, I don't care. You do them whenever you want. If you think about it from a rating perspective, The quizzes are graded automatically.
Right.
So if everyone, the problem with the labs is if I say just do the labs whenever. One, you're not reinforcing that learning. Two, I'm not getting a sense of how are you doing. And three, if I did that, everyone would just hand them in the last 2 days, and now I've got 8 billion labs tomorrow. It's not going to happen. Right? I'm done, or I'm finished if I do that. So that's the idea. So get them done within the week, and then they're. But I'll put the due dates on the labs now, so it's really clear. Someone said, "Well, but you don't put the due dates on the labs." I say, "Well, that's fair. That's confusing." Okay. Nice. Grid. I love it. This is awesome sauce. That's what that is. All right, so I'm going to, I'll tap out of this live event now. And broadcast.